31, Genesis 31. And we're going to start with verse 11. Working on this now for the last couple of weeks. Hopefully get it finished up today. We started off with Jacob's journey to Abraham's homeland. If you remember, they wanted him to go find go with Esau first of all. Go find a wife that would among their people and not a pagan woman. And we see Jacob kind of going out on his own for the first time. And being uncertain and unsure of a few things. God assuring him through it, showing him, reiterating the Abraham covenant with him, showing him the ladder, the angels going up and down, letting him know that he's present in an ever-present working force in his life, not just kind of off in the distance. Then the second part of this, we finished up last week with Jacob dwelling there in Abraham's homeland with Laban and him agreeing to serve and work for Laban for eventually 14 years to get his wife that he loved from when he first saw her, Rachel. And of course we know that the first 7 years of Leah, and then Leah wasn't loved, and God closed up Rachel's womb for a while. And we finished up last week looking at God blessing Jacob with the family, blessing him with wealth, and going through all the kids and different ways in which God is continuing to bless Jacob with different things, okay? Then we get to what we're going to do today, and we finish up here and start by looking at chapter 31. And Jacob is now going to journey back to the Promised Land. Right? He spent quite a bit of time away from the Promised Land. And if you remember, the Promised Land is not Abraham and Jacob's, not their homeland. Right? The Promised Land is Canaan, which God told Abraham he was going to give him, give his people. And we've seen Abraham there and some of the beginnings of them starting to get portions of that land. But Jacob journeyed back to the Promised Land is a continuing of the Abrahamic covenant that God gave Abraham and then later on Jacob as well, and Isaac too. So we'll see them heading back, okay? That's what today is, the lesson today is about. We see God protecting, first of all, Jacob from Laban. Because if you remember, at the end of last week, Laban had given Jacob some things to do, and Jacob had said, I'll take the spotted calves, the blemished ones, the ones you don't want, the ones that you don't want part of your flock, you can keep the good ones, essentially. I'll take the bad ones, you keep the good ones. And through Laban changing his mind and a bunch of different things ending up happening, Jacob has pretty much all Laban's flocks, right? Got all the good stuff from Laban. And Laban's not happy with him. And he's looking for him, on the hunt for him, because he's decreased Laban's wealth quite a bit. And God's done that, right? God has blessed Jacob with this wealth because of his obedience, because of his faithfulness to him. But he's done it at Laban's expense. And Laban is not very, very happy at all. Laban's sons are definitely not happy. So, end of last week, we finished up at verse 10 of chapter 31 of Laban unfavorable towards Jacob. So we're going to see now, starting in verse 11, and we're going to read all the way down through verse 55, of God protecting Jacob from Laban, and then his journey back as well. Okay? So verse 11, first of all, and we'll read down through verse 22 to start with. And we kind of see God telling Jacob what to do. All right, so verse 11 down through verse 22 to start with. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle, are ring-streaked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now rise, eat the And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours, and our children's, now then whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. Then Jacob rose up, set his sons and his wives upon camels. And he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten. Cattle again, which he had gotten in Padanaram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were his father's. And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, and that he told him not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river, and set his face toward Mount Gilead. And it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob was fled. So, verse 11, God appears to Jacob in a dream, and calls himself, first of all, the God of Bethel. Okay? And why God reveals himself in this way is he is reminding Jacob of the vow that Jacob had done now 14, 15, 16 years previously at Bethel on the first couple of nights that he was out on his own. So he's reminding him of what he vowed there at Bethel and the fact that he had made a vow to him. Right? God had shown that he was with Jacob during all this. Okay? He also showed that he was with Jacob when he was in Padanaram, which was where the area he was in now. So during this whole ordeal, this event in Jacob's life, this has been quite the event. This has been 14 years, 2 wives, lots of kids, father-in-law upset, ready to kill him, huge wealth amassed, and living off kind of on his own and doing all this thing. This has been quite the event, and God is reminding him that he has been with him during all this, and he is reminding him now, telling him, that he needs to return to the promised land. Okay? So we see down through verses 11, down through verse 22, Jacob gets this dream, and he goes and tells his wives that God had told them to move back to the promised land. And we see that Rachel and Leah agreed with him and saw the importance of making sure they're moving back to the promised land. So Jacob takes his wives and his children, puts them up on camels, packs up all his goods, which would have been quite a bit of stuff, and left town with the flocks of animals that he has now has. Okay. Now a little thing that was just kind of thrown in there, verse 19. In the midst of this packing up of all these things, right? His animals, and his children, and the stuff that he has gotten. We see in verse 19 that when Laban went to shear his sheep, that Rachel did what? Yeah, Rachel went in and picked up some of the images or the idols that were her father's. Okay, Rachel takes the family idols of Laban without Jacob knowing it at all. Okay, and that's in there. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. After 3 days, though, Laban discovers that Jacob had left. And I think this tells us just how much land, area, and stuff that Jacob and Laban had, right? And in 3 days, he kind of realized that a lot of this stuff was gone, his flock was gone, all these different things. And in the midst of that, he sets to take off and track down Jacob and to track down the idols that were taken from him as well. Okay? Look at verses 29 and 30 for just a second. Actually, hang on, before we do that, let's look at verse 23 and 24. And he took his brethren with him and pursued him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. And God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said unto him, Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob, either good or bad. So, about a week, Laban is going after Jacob. But before he was able to get to Jacob and confront him, God appeared to Laban and told him, essentially, leave him alone. Right? Don't mess with him. Don't bother him. Don't confront him or threaten him in either way. And if you look at verse 25, then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. We see Laban here heeding God's warning of not doing that. All right? Now, if you look at verse 29 and 30 with me, let's read it first. Let me ask you this question. Is in the power of my hand to do you hurt? But the God of your father spake unto me yesterday, this is Laban speaking, spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my father's goods? All right? And just by looking at those two verses, we would take Laban's gods, which is really what he's upset about, the idols being taken, and take Jacob's God and compare them. Okay? So take Laban's idols and Jacob's God and compare them, and then read verse 29 and 30 again. And how would you compare them? So it's in the power of my hand to do hurt. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed, thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? So what's the comparison here between the gods that Laban wants and Jacob's God? Let me ask it in maybe a better way. Could Laban steal Jacob's God? No. Right? But Rachel was able to steal Laban's gods. Correct? Now, what's the comparison there? Laban's gods are what? What are Laban's gods? Pretty simple question. What are they? The idols that are material, worthless, lifeless, just things that Laban thinks that are important for whatever reason, right? Mr. Rob mentioned last week about the stick or whatever it was that the missionary had, or the guy thought was important thing, just like a stick. To Jacob, these idols, although Rachel stole them, and she knew the importance of them to her father, but these were just things, right? They were just laying there, completely lifeless, unable to help themselves, right? The idols, the gods couldn't raise themselves or get up and walk back to Laban. They're unable to do that at all. Now compare that to what God did for Jacob to Laban. What did Jacob's God do to Laban?
Spoke to Laban.
All right, exactly. Shut up for today. Don't mess with me. Right? That's my guy. Don't mess with me. So we see the difference now in Laban here also, right? He sees the difference of his gods and Jacob's God, because does Laban mess with Jacob? No, he doesn't. He heeds the warning, and he doesn't try to confront him, or doesn't try to take back his things in any way. Now Jacob here, not knowing that Rachel had actually taken these gods, goes on and tells Laban that he can search the tents for these idols, and goes as far to say that he can kill whoever took them. All right, let's keep going. Verse 31. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure, thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me, with whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren, discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then when he went out of Leah's tent, and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images, and put them in camel's furniture, and set upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And he said to her, and she said to her father, let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of the women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. And Jacob was wroth, and chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, where is my trespass? What is my sin, that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Wherefore, whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all the household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of the flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beast I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. My hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was, in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been 20 years in thy house. I have served thee 14 years for 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac, had been with me, surely thou hast sent me away now empty. God hath seen my affliction and labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. Okay, so Jacob tells Laban, find the idols. Find out who took them, we'll kill them. So we see Laban frantically searching around the tents here, right? Going into Leah's tents, going into the maidservant's tents, not finding anything. Eventually, going into Rachel's tent, and she had them hid, and she was essentially sitting on them and keeping them hid from her father, and told her because she was in the position that she was unable to get up, and he was unable to find them. So the idols don't turn up. And as he's frantically looking around and he can't find these things, Jacob rebukes Laban here in the midst of this search and reiterates to him just how faithfully he had served him. Right, 20 years, Jacob had done exactly what Laban wanted. 7 years for Leah, 7 years for Rachel, 6 more years for the cattle and the flocks. And Laban had changed the terms of the agreement multiple times. Anytime there was a loss, Jacob just kind of ate the loss. He didn't go to Laban anytime. We saw him go through during drought, during frost. I lost sleep. Anytime there was something bad happening, I didn't come to you and ask for anything. I took it upon myself to take care of it. He continues, and he goes to tell him now, for 20 years he was faithfully serving him, even though Laban had been very unfair with Jacob. In the midst of this little monologue that he goes on, explaining what he's done, Jacob makes sure that he tells Laban that it was God who got all the credit for everything that had taken place. Right? God, the one who Isaac fears, the one of Isaac and Cause's fear, that was the one that kept him from losing everything at Laban's hand. Okay? Now, the text here gives us absolutely no explanation at all of why Rachel took these idols. Okay? We don't see them at all. And you pick up a commentary, and any commentary will give you a different reason on why they think she took the idols. But we don't, anywhere else in Scripture, really see anything else about the reasoning for her to take these. Personally, I think she took them out of spite. This is just Alancia's, and this is what I think. Rachel knew that Laban was, those idols, those images were very, very important. She had seen her love, Jacob, go through 20 years of her father treating him unfairly. And then now he's going to take the stuff back and maybe even kill him. And she sees all this. She knows what's going on. She's not dumb. She knows what's happening. She sees it. So she goes in out of spite and takes these idols from her father, knowing good and well the distress that this would cause him. Okay? Again, I don't know that for sure, but that's just what I think probably took place. But in the midst of all this, God takes even her stealing these things and allows Jacob to, shows Jacob and Laban, teach him another lesson. Right? It teaches them the lesson about how Jacob's God is greater than these false images. And also goes in and gives Jacob the opportunity to kind of express to Laban one more time that the reason that the wealth had come and the blessings had come was because God had been taking care of him for these 20 years as Laban was as he was working for Laban. Okay? Get to verse 43 and down through verse 55. Laban is going to ask Jacob for a covenant. And we see Jacob indulging Laban in this covenant, and then Laban kind of getting up and leaving the next day for home. So we're just going to read down through the rest of the chapter just to read what exactly this covenant is. In verse 43 first, and Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters. And these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. What can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children, which they have born? Now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone, set it up for a pillar. And And Jacob said to his brethren, Gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it Jegar-Sashadutha. And Jacob called it Galeed. And Laban said, This heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it Galeed, I guess. And Mizpah, for he said, The Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent from another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives besides my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, Behold this heap, and behold this pillar which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be my witness, and these pillars be my witness. That I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their fathers, judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount, and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread and tarried all night on the mount. And early in the morning Laban rose up, kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned unto his place. So we see this covenant set up. We see Laban's terms of don't take any other wives, don't do my daughters any harm. We see Jacob's terms of the agreement. You're going to pass over this into this area. You're going to pass through this place where we've set up this altar, these pillars. Come talk to me, but it can't be for any type of harm or any way. So we see that both of them are having this covenant, and Jacob indulging Laban and listening to Laban for this covenant. And we see Laban in verse 35 at the end of the chapter, they're getting up and leaving the next day for home. And after the covenant with Laban, we see Jacob offering a sacrifice, verses 54 there, chapter 31, calling his kinsmen and his brethren together to eat. Jacob probably had his vow to God in his mind as he shared the meal with his kinsmen. If you go back to chapter 28 with me, look at verses 20 through 22. This is the vow that God or Jacob made to God. I'm sure this was probably very present in his mind during this whole ordeal. Verse 20 of chapter 28. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. And the stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the tenth unto thee. So I'm sure this vow that he had just made, or had made previously, was very present in his mind as he was there going through this covenant, doing this, going through the sacrifice, and then sharing the meal with his kinsmen. God had been with Jacob and had richly provided for him while he was not in the promised land. Okay? Now we get to the second part of this, and this Jacob is still journeying back to the promised land. Now, in the far distance, off still quite a way, lay the hills of his home. Okay? And Jacob felt as he's traveling, feels the chilling fear of beating up Esau at some point. Remember, when Jacob left 20 years ago, he did not leave on good terms. One of the reasons that his mom sent him out because she was worried about Esau killing him. So there was a fear of him meeting Esau. And that's what we start with here in chapter 32. And Jacob went his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's host. And he called the name of this place Mahane. I had it earlier. I had it written down. Where did I put the pronunciation? I don't know where I put it. Mahane. We'll call it Mahane. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall you speak unto my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now. So, as Jacob is getting closer to home, he begins to worry about what his brother Esau will do when he sees them. And for this very reason, being concerned, God's angels in verse 2, show up and meet with Jacob. And when he sees them, he knows exactly what this is, right? He actually says in verse 2, this is God's hosts. And he calls the name of the place there, whatever. And that actually means two camps together, or two hosts together. Okay? In reference to God's camp and Jacob's camp, kind of staying there in the same place. So now we know Jacob's mindset here is that he's worried, he's concerned. What should Jacob's mind be at the sight of the host of God showing up and talking to him? You know that he's worried. God shows up. So what should Jacob be thinking here? How should he feel? Exactly. God's on his side, right? If I'm worried about something, if I'm getting ready to get in a fight, not a fighter, but if I had to, if I knew it was coming, and I was concerned about it, and God showed up with some of my angels, it's like, hey, I think that would be these, right? God's there with him, going to help him on his side, and obviously more powerful than any army that Esau can even try to get around Jacob. Okay? But the message here, God's protection, as we see in verses 6 and 7, does not seem to fully get through to Jacob. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. And Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and camels into two bands. So the message here of protection did not sit in with Jacob well. We saw verses 3, 4, 5 there, sent people to talk to Esau and his people. And when they do that, they come back and return. And he still fears Esau and tries to pacify Esau with the message that he's not going to try to come in and take any of Esau's possessions. When the messengers come back with no message of Esau at all, but with the news that 400 soldiers are actually marching with Esau, Jacob is really, really concerned and becomes pretty dismayed here at this point. Now, his fears were groundless, but he was for sure that the danger here was real and was going to have something bad kind of happen to it. Verse 7. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed and divided his people. Verse 8. And he came and said, if Esau come to the one company and smite it, and the other company which is left shall escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saith unto thee, return to thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal with thee well. And I will do well with thee. I am not worthy the least of all the mercies and all the truth which thou hast shown unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. So in concern and worry of Esau, he splits up his people, thinking if Esau attacks half of them, at least the other half will survive. That's kind of the plan that he comes up with. And try to salvage something here in the midst of Esau's fury. So he does that, and he also prays to God of his grandfather Abraham. He says God of his father Isaac, and he's reminding God of God's command to him to return to Canaan. He also reminds God of God's promise to deal well with him. He goes on in verses down through 10 to confess that he's not worthy of the kindness and the faithfulness that God has given him. He left home with little more than a staff, and was returning with two companies of people. God had blessed him, surely, but he was still fearful. And he prays in verse 11 and 12, deliver me, I pray thee, from thy hand of thy brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me with the mother of the children. And thou says, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the seas, which cannot be numbered for the multitude. So Jacob is still concerned. He's praying to God here and reminding him of the promises that God had given him. Okay? After praying, verses 13 down through verse 21, Jacob launches a plan here to appease Esau. And what he does, and we don't have time to read down through all of it, but down through verses 13 through 21, what he does, he takes his goats, he takes his sheep, camels, cattle, donkeys, and he sent his men out with each drove. He sends people with each of these things. It's essentially just gifts for Esau. Okay, to try to give him these things to appease Esau. Esau's fury and his anger. And that's what happens down through verse 21. So now, having sent all of his company across the brook Jabbok, which is where they're at, where he sends them across, Jacob is left alone and by himself. So if you go with me to verse 22, you see, he rose up at night, and his 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over before Jabbok, and took them, and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him into the breaking of the day. So he sent everybody across, and he's just there by himself. Still worried, still concerned, hoping that the gifts he's going to give Esau would help, hoping the plan to appease Esau in some way would help, but he sees himself there, and he's left alone. Now, in the middle of this night, in verse 24, we see that he wrestles with the man and has a wrestling match with this man until the very next morning. Okay? Verse 25, and when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him, and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And as he passed over Peniel, and the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, to this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and the sinew that shrank. So we see him in the middle of this wrestling match, and it goes on all night. And Jacob here puts up a good fight, right? He really does. Jacob resists God throughout the remaining hours of the night. He simply just would not submit. Okay, so he puts up a pretty good fight. And there's some symbolism here, right? There's quite a bit of symbolism, actually. Jacob doesn't just give in, right? And he's trying to use his own will against God, trying to fight God in any way that he can. And he does a pretty good job of it for a while, but eventually God always does what? Always going to win, right? He's always going to win. He's always going to make sure his will is taken care of. So the Lord reaches down and touches Jacob's thigh, and dislocates it. We saw in verse 25. And Jacob had to learn that when he was weak, he had to depend upon God. Okay, this is the reasoning for this wrestling match that takes place. Okay, Jacob had to learn that when he was weak, he needed to depend upon God. All right, so as Jacob clings here to the angel of the Lord, the angel told Jacob to let him go because the sun was coming up, verse 26. Jacob knew that it was unprepared here for his meeting with Esau, and he begs, verse 26, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So the angel of the Lord asked Jacob's name. Jacob admits that he was Jacob. His name, of course, we know, if you remember back, Jacob's name meant supplanter, the one who takes another place, the one who will resort to deceit and to trickery. Jacob's name meant. He was named that. So Jacob's name itself suggests that Jacob was relying on himself and his own power. So we see his name being changed to Israel. Now, the meaning of Israel is unclear, but there is a definite emphasis on God rather than Jacob. So perhaps Israel means God will rule. Okay. Jacob begs and tells, the angel in verse 29, tell me, I pray thee thy name. And the answer, of course, does not come forth. But Jacob knew good and well whom he was wrestling with, and exclaimed that he had seen God face to face, and his life is preserved. As the sun rose up here, Jacob limps away, knowing both his weaknesses now and his strength. And he was weak in himself, but strong in the Lord. Okay, so that's the rest of the match there, of course, that Jacob had with the angel of the Lord. Now, next week, we get to it today, is chapter 33, and protecting Jacob from Esau. So we'll get into that next week. We'll probably probably start the next lesson next week as well, because chapter 33 doesn't have, it's only got 20 verses, so we'll get through it pretty quick. But again, we see Jacob, 20 years now, relying on God, being blessed greatly because of it. And he kind of comes back, relapse, right? Kind of falls off the wagon there of following after God and tries to do things of his own accord. And God has to show him once again that his strength is in obeying and trusting after him, not in his own way. Big event also took place here in chapter 32, right? When now it's the first talking of Israel, first time we see that in scriptures. We see Jacob's name being changed to it. And in verse 32, we didn't really mention it, but it's the thing that the Israelites did, and some of the Jews still do, is that they won't eat the seed there off the vine because of what happened here with Jacob and his angel. So we're getting to, as we've kind of harrowed in here, kind of narrowed in on some of the characters in Genesis, we're starting to more and more see the plan of God that was talked about in chapter 3 of Genesis, bruising the heel, stomping the head of the serpent. We're starting to see the groundwork laid for how that is going to happen. Of course, we know how it's going to happen, but we're starting to actually see in Scriptures the actual evidence, these people being put in place of God's plan of bringing Christ through the people of Israel and setting him back as a rightful king, which is pretty cool to kind of see. So next week, again, we'll get back into this, look at Jacob and Esau meeting once again, and then move on to lesson 12, which I think is Joseph. Yeah, which is Joseph. All right, so let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the lesson that we had here. Thank you for, again, being able to live the life of Jacob here and some of the things that he did, and how you were so quick to bless him and show him what your blessings could entail when he was faithful in you, and also quick to teach him lessons on how it was important to continue, even in times of distress and times of worry, to make sure that his trust was upon you. And I pray the same thing for us. This is just more and more reinforcements of the lesson we've seen all throughout this book, that it is important to rely solely and entirely on you. Our concerns, our wants, our desires, what we want for our life, gets in the way and can cause dislocated hips and all kinds of problems. So it's important to